Hello friends, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, back with another Halloween video. If you have missed any of my Halloween videos so far this year, I will have a link to the playlist at the end of this video, because this marks 20 or 21 so far. I've posted a lot. Anyway, I purchased this Hero Arts Pumpkin Bunch set a while ago. And it's been sitting here just waiting. There's a stamp set. There's a coordinating wafer die. There is a stencil set that works with it or on its own. And I got it all because I was like, of course, more is more, you know? So I started with the stamp, this great big bunch of pumpkins stamp. And I'm stamping it onto A2 piece of cardstock, just to give you an idea how big this is. And I messed it up the first time, but cardstock has two sides. So I just flipped it over and stamped it again. And I'm stamping it with VersaFine Clair NOCTURNE ink. And then I decided, it's like, well, I've got everything out. Why not do more than one? So I stamped it onto a second panel of cardstock. And this is Simon's smooth white cardstock. So once I have everything stamped, I'm going to use the stencil set to add all of my color. And I made this way more work than it needed to be. I could have just put these panels on my like Brutus Monroe stencil mat, you know, the sticky one, and save myself the aggravation of just using tape when you're using this many stencils. But hindsight, as always. So anywho, I'm using positively saturated inks for my blending. I started with Peachy, which is the lightest orange ink, and then I'm going in with Grapefruit, which is my medium shade of ink. And yeah, this stencil set coordinates perfectly with this stamp, but you could also just do the stencils and create like a no line look, which would be really fun. But I'm just using it to add color. I don't know. It's like this satisfying thing I have. I really like the whole coordinating stencil and doing ink blending to color in images. It just gives it that sort of seamless look. And I don't know. I love it. It's ridiculously satisfying. So this set has 5 stencils. There's 2 for the pumpkins, 2 for the stems and leaves, and then there's a final stencil that you can use to make it Halloween, because that's kind of the beauty of this set, is it could be fall themed or Halloween. Just depends on what you want to do. And of course I went with Halloween. So with the second pumpkin stencil, I'm using Mandarin ink, so my deepest orange. So I just kept lining everything up. I had washi tape on the back of the cardstock and just used my blending brushes. And I'm working on my waffle flower stencil mat. So after I did the orange for the pumpkins, now I'm lining up the stencils to do the greenery. And there's the full one that just adds the color, and then there's a detail one. So for the full one, I'm using Simon's Sprout and then Fairway. So a lighter green and a bit of a medium green. So blending that on, and then I'll do the exact same thing to the second panel. And then once I've got the greens down, I'll take the detail stencil and do my darkest green. And like I said, you can totally use this. And there's a guide on the back of the stencil packaging that shows how it all, you know, comes together and whatnot, and how you can just use just the stencils. So I like it. I like options, and you don't have to have all the things, says the person who gets full sets of everything. Anyway. So once I had the main greener on, this is when I go in with that detail stencil, get that in place, and go in with my darkest green. So that just gives it that little extra something. And you can definitely make it more dramatic if you did more dramatic colors, you know, like do like a really light green and then a really dark green, you know, those sorts of things. But I kind of like the little bit more subtle look of this. So after I did all of my stenciling with the main stencils, I die cut these because, of course, I got the wafer die as well. So I taped the wafer die into place and die cut both of these bunches of pumpkins. And I'm going to let everything really dry before I go into the next step with the pumpkins. So for my backgrounds, these are, again, just pieces of A2 size cardstock. And I'm using the green inks again. I started with my lightest, which was Sprout. So I blend that all around the perimeter. I'm not worried about the middle because you're not going to see it because, you know, the pumpkins are going to get adhered on top of it. And again, you could skip the die cutting and just do all of this, you know, on the background, use the stencils, etc. But I got the wafer die because I was like, ooh, I would like to be able to pop things up, you know, with dimension. And so that's what I did. So after I blended the Sprout ink around the perimeter, I am going around with the Fairway green ink. So the shade darker, just to deepen it a bit. And these all always smooth out, you know, as they dry. So after I've got those blended, I'm going to use Simon's Scattered Stars stencil. I've shown this in several videos lately. It's one of my favorites. So I put that on and I used the Field ink, so the darkest shade of green in this trio, and blended that around the perimeter, which I just seriously love it. I just thought it'd be a cute little background with everything else going on without being too busy. You know what I mean? So blended that on. Once all of that is blended and in place, the inks on the pumpkins completely dry. Use my anti-static powder tool. And now I'm using that final Hero Arts stencil, the Halloween themed one. I'm getting it all lined up here and I'm just going to tape it in place. And I'm going to mask off the areas where I don't want to get any ink because for right now, I just want to put ink over their faces. So I've got that same VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, and I'm just using a blending foam for this and heavily applying this over the stencil. I want to make sure I get all that detail of their faces. And then while the ink is still wet, I'm going to pour over some black glitter embossing powder. Another fave. Love it. So brush off any random little bits that decide to stick around, you know, and then I'll melt that with my heat tool. So now all their faces are going to be black, glittery, you know, jack-o'-lantern faces. Live. So, and then I'll repeat that process on the second bunch of pumpkins. And then I lined up the pumpkins on my background, removed them out of the way. I just needed that to like get this stencil placed onto the background. It's the same Halloween one. And now I'm blending just the other parts. So there's little bats on the top, there's a little spider and little spider webs along the bottom. So same thing, I used the VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. I'm not going to heat emboss this, but I just wanted to add these little, you know, Halloween elements to my background. So did that on the first panel, and then I just pressed the second one, like just kind of right in there into the tape so it was lined up as well. And then did the same thing, added the ink. So then I've got this fun little spooky star green background for my little Halloween pumpkins. So once I've got all of that blended onto the background, I did end up deciding to cut these down. I wasn't originally. I was going to leave them as A2 sized, but habits just don't want to die out. So I cut about a 1/4 inch off each side. So these will be smaller than my A2 card front. And then I just took some black soot distress ink and lightly blended this around the very edges, you know, just give it that little extra spooky something. So very lightly went around that with my blending brush and the black soot distress ink, and it just again gives it that little extra something. So after I had done that, I need to do something for the insides of the cards. So both my card bases are going to be top folding A2 cards, again smooth white cardstock. I used some post-it tape to mask off where the scoreline was, and then I lined up that Scattered Stars stencil again, and I am just very lightly blending that Sprout ink, so the lightest green ink, again just kind of around the perimeter, so it just brings the stars onto the inside of these cards. And I'm going to do that to both of the card bases, so they've got these nice little green stars. And again, you could leave it here, but I'm going to go extra. So I'm going to blend that around the perimeter. And then I also filmed, because I've mentioned this and I think I've shown it in one video, but when I'm using like a ton of stencils like I did on today's cards, this is what I do with them. I wash them with just soap and water in the sink. And I have this Boone drying mat. I've actually had one of these for years and years and years in my kitchen, because I had it since my kids were small. Because when you're washing like bottles and soothers and all those things, that's what I would use to dry everything. But I have one in my craft area as well, because it's perfect for putting your stencils in. I will have a link to it, because Simon started carrying these months ago, I think. Yeah, and they're great. It's awesome for when now we have so many stencils, and a lot of times all these layering stencils, you have like 10 at a time to clean, and where are you going to put them? So I stick them in there till they're dry and then put them back in the package. So anywho, on the insides of the cards, I stamped that pumpkin stamp with the lightest orange ink, so the peachy ink. So that just, brings that in as well. And then I stamped the Happy Halloween sentiments from that pumpkin bunch set with the Nocturne ink. And then my card base, or like the background and the pumpkins, I put Simon's Big Mama foam tape on. So it gives it that dimension that I love, but it's not too thick and bulky. So I popped the pumpkins into place on the background. The background also has the Big Mama foam tape. This stuff is super thin and I love it. Absolutely love it. So pop that onto my card base, and then I had white heat embossed the Thankful for You sentiment from that set as well. And I'm going to pop that into place. I had white heat embossed onto black cardstock, and that I just fussy cut, quick and simple. Pop that on with little foam squares as well, and that finished off these cards. Super fun. Love it. Like, these images you could totally watercolor too. Love. Stencils are super fun. Watercoloring would be really fun. Anything, really. I love it. So, as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I will have a supply list with links to everything I used in the description box below the video, so you guys can check that out if you are interested. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my videos. Thumbs up, comment, tells the robot overlords you guys like what you see, and maybe the algorithm will push it out even more. Subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye!